Good afternoon. I formally declare open this Planning Committee meeting of Colac Otway Shire Council on the 14th of September 2022. Almighty God, we seek your blessing and guidance in our deliberations on behalf of the people of the Colac Otway Shire. Enable this council's decisions to be those that contribute to the true welfare and betterment of our community. I would like to start this afternoon by acknowledging the traditional custodians and lawmakers of this land, their elders past and present, and welcome any descendants here today. I would like to advise that this Planning Committee meeting will be recorded and live streamed with the exception of confidential matters. This includes the public participation sections of meetings. The live stream recording of this afternoon's meeting will be available on the website as soon as practical. By participating in open Planning Committee meetings, individuals consent to the use and disclosure of the information they share at the meeting, including any personal and/or sensitive information. Please note that it is an offence to make an unauthorised recording of the meeting. Can members of the gallery please turn their phones off or to silent? Thank you. I note that Councillor Stephen Hart is an apology for this meeting. I'll also just note that Councillor Joe McCracken is on a leave of absence, so there are 5 councillors in the room. Are there any declarations of interest, please? None? Okay, I propose that we move to confirm the minutes from the Planning Committee meeting held on the 13th of July 2022. Do I have a mover? Councillor Potter, do I have a seconder? Councillor Bell, is that to be opposed? No. All those in favour? The item's carried 5-0. Okay. Verbal submissions from those applicants and objectors who have confirmed in writing that they wish to speak to their submission will be heard prior to the consideration of the agenda item. A limit of 5 minutes will apply to each submitter. I'll note that we received... there are no objectors speaking, no objections, and we'll be hearing from the applicant, Chelsea Cox, and also possibly from representing, I think, Mr. Ian Hopkins. Okay, now we move to item 8.1. The purpose of this report is to consider planning permission for the use and development of the land at 640 Forest Apollo Bay Road for a dwelling, proposed construction and agricultural building, and to upgrade the access to the land. Okay, so verbal submissions. I'll ask Chelsea Cox to make your submission. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So thank you, Mayor, councillors and officers for the opportunity to speak on behalf of and in support of the application at 640 Forest Apollo Bay Road, Barramunga. Before I proceed, I was hoping to request that the site's owner, Ian, speaks to the operation and the impact on him following my speech. Would this be something that's permitted?
Yes.
Yes, great. Thank you. To continue, my role as a planning consultant is to provide a response to Council's recommendation and to hopefully assist with a broader understanding of the proposal. While there has been a lack of understanding around the use and purpose of the proposed agriculture on site, I will defer to the owner, Dr. Ian Hopkins, to detail this further and will instead focus on the planning matters. Firstly, we would like to refer to and refute Council's recommendation that a dwelling is not genuinely essential in this location. The site is currently used for the growing and harvesting of Indigenous health foods, which require specific and labour-intensive care, particularly in the harvesting, drying and protection from pests, as Ian will detail further. As the owner is currently limited in the amount of time he can spend on site, this operation is running at a limited capacity and is not viable in the long term due to the many hours of travel to and from the site and the increasing physical work. Without a residence on site, which will allow the owner the ability to continue to operate this agricultural business, the site will revert back to its previous unkept vacant state. This is not a good outcome for anyone, not for the owner, neighbouring residents or council. One of the objectives of the farming zone is to encourage the retention of productive agricultural land, and a refusal to allow a dwelling on this site would be a direct discouragement of an agricultural enterprise in favour of vacant, unused land. We would stress the importance of Indigenous food, of biodiversity, of weed and pest management, and of vibrant, successful agricultural businesses that create opportunity, positive precedents, and locally grown produce in an area poised to utilise it well. Why not encourage the Otway Rangers to be a leader in specialised important herbs and plants? The proposed dwelling is a modest 2-bedroom dwelling with a flat roof. It has been designed to be in a low scale to reduce visibility from the street. It has been located on the highest point of land because this is the only acceptable location under the bushfire management overlay. Safety was of the utmost importance in this application, and the siting of the dwelling has been selected following advice from the CFA. The siting of shed and garden beds was selected following advice from Bilboa Landscapes. Neither the owner nor the applicant made decisions about the layout of the proposal. We would also like to note that the only objection that was originally received for this application was withdrawn following a meeting between us and the objector where we were able to resolve all concerns. There is an over-reliance of the 2011 application on this lot in Council's recommendation for refusal. This is a completely separate application that is not relevant. This previous application for a dwelling had no agricultural use supporting the dwelling, and as such, we agree that this was not an application that should have been approved, and we ourselves would not have represented this application nor been the applicant. With this logic, it is then worth noting that there was also an application approved for a dwelling in 2006. Additionally, we reject the point in Council's recommendation that the proposal has the potential to limit the operation and expansion of nearby agriculture, for which Council has offered no explanation or justification behind this statement. It is not clear how a dwelling on this lot, used to support agriculture, could have any impact on the use of surrounding lots. We would again note many of the nearby lots are landlocked and unable to support agriculture, and that there is no agriculture on the adjacent lot. Additionally, there is significant precedence of dwellings on smaller lots in this area. A list of addresses where this is present has been provided previously. The continued use of this site to grow Indigenous health foods increases biodiversity, as well as the agricultural amenity of the area. It is implausible to say that it will negatively impact agriculture on other lots. Council's recommendation also relies heavily on the basis that the site is not located in the appropriate area for rural living. We agree, however, this dwelling is not proposed for rural living. It is proposed in the farming zone to support and ensure the survival of agriculture on the land. The financial spreadsheet in the farm management plan demonstrates the economic viability of this project, and it also clearly shows that the labour input needed is too large for the enterprise to be managed remotely. Ian has demonstrated a strong philosophical and financial commitment to this enterprise. His commitment is evident in that he has applied for this permit after the funding and developing of the agriculture, which has been of significant cost to him, rather than on the basis of a plan for future agriculture. This is an opportunity to support a pioneering enterprise in Indigenous health foods, and we hope that a sensible decision can be made this afternoon in supporting this dwelling. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any questions for Ms Cox? Sorry, Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm just interested in relation to the fire risk. I know this has been mitigated and CFA cast their eyes over it. I'm just wondering if you could just take us through that, and if there was to be a residence built there, what mitigating factors will be put in place to reduce the risk to someone being out there in the middle of a fire?
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, bushfire management report, including the statement, the landscape, all of that was done as part of the application. It was done by a Beacon bushfire consultants. So Luke, who completed that report, is ex-CFA himself. He was actually recommended to us by the CFA in Apollo Bay. So he's completed the report, and then the application was also referred to the CFA, who had no objections with it. So firstly, the siting and design was the big one to mitigate risk. So it's located on that highest point of land. If you're on site, you can see it's located away from the vegetation, a significant enough distance. It also meant the vegetation didn't have to be removed. The dwelling has also been designed in materials that reduce fire risk, and the dwelling is also sited in a position that's convenient for driveway access. I mean, it's quite a small lot, so you're not obviously going to be in the middle of the lot far away from the driveway.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? No, thanks very much
Thank
for
you.
your submission.
Thank you.
I'll now call on Mr Hopkins to make his submission.
Thank you for this opportunity. Dark Emu, a book by Bruce Pascoe, was my epiphany. With 40 reprints, this book created a new awareness of the extraordinary culture of our First Nations people. Australia is on the cusp of a rediscovery of Aboriginal culture, and our growing awareness of Indigenous foods is a catalyst to that process. My enterprise is a small contribution to that. And the wonderful health-giving properties of Indigenous food is a real bonus. I wonder if we could pass around that.
Sorry, are we allowed to pass this around?
Yep, that'll be fine.
That's just a summary of the health profile of some of these plants and an example of the way that we market our river mint. Just by way of explanation, where it says a bracket and a number and an X, it's all relative to the to blueberries. So where it says mountain pepper leaves are 9 times, that means it's 9 times the antioxidant level of blueberries. So they have fabulous health profiles. There are just 2 of us west of Melbourne pioneering the growth of bush tucker plants privately. And we're doing this with virtually no external sources of advice in the practical aspects of growing Indigenous health foods. Strangely, New South Wales, Queensland and South Australia are way ahead of Victoria. So hopefully what we learn from our experience will be useful to those who follow. But practical experience over the last 3 years has revealed the labour intensity of growing, processing and harvesting these products. It's really a matter of simple arithmetic. For instance, it takes about 20 minutes to strip enough leaves from river mint stems for a marketable Ziploc bag like the one that's being passed around. Depending on ambient temperature, drying can take 1 to 2 weeks. It must be done in a dark place or the leaves will turn black. Stripping cutleaf mint and roundleaf mint takes less time, but due to their higher oil content, they take more time to dry. The limiting factor at this stage has been the amount of space for drying in a dark place. Hence the 11 by 13 metre shed proposed. Beyond that, as the farm management plan shows, the time required to process 8 kilograms of river mint next year is 271 hours, increasing and plateauing at 500 hours a year or 2 later. And that's why I haven't planted out several of the beds last year, because I know I wouldn't be able to process greater volumes from a remote place and without adequate shedding. But beyond the mints is the time required to maintain, harvest, process and market all the other plants when they become harvestable. The mountain pepper, the muntries, midgeon berries, strawberry gum, lemon myrtle, lemon aspen and Illawarra plum. When all existing plants have reached their maturity, the labour estimate is 186 weeks per year based on assumptions provided by my nurseryman. When you add up all the hours needed to make this enterprise economically viable, it becomes quite apparent that operating even the existing enterprise and supervising staff from a remote location involving the cost and time of a 2.5-hour round trip is simply not a practical or economic option, especially when it's raining. Then there is the labour required for all the maintenance tasks in an environment of prodigious growth, as outlined in the farm management plan also, and the need to provide continuous protection from wallabies and kangaroos. And that represents another estimated 12 weeks per year. This enterprise has the potential to becoming economically viable but also to be of real benefit to the area. That cannot happen without a full-time presence. The alternative is that this pioneering enterprise is not economically viable, with the consequence the plants will not be harvested and blackberry and ragwort will reinvade. Many of the plants will be destroyed by wallabies. And the enormous amount of time and money spent on infrastructure would be wasted. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr Hopkins? Councillor Costa and then Councillor White.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you for allowing us to have a site inspection yesterday. It's very informative. Thank you very much. I'm just wondering, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, what your background is. Are you a farmer or what is your background?
I was brought up on the land near Winchelsea. I did a first degree in agriculture and a master's and a PhD in animal breeding, design of animal breeding programs for sheep and cattle. Yes, I've had a bit of a background in agriculture. Not that the horticulture in my first degree was much help in what I'm doing now, but we just proceed, as I said, unconfused by facts and undeterred by ignorance, and making a lot of mistakes along the way.
Councillor White.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if part of your plan for the future and the enterprise is whether or not you are considering opening to the public as part of the...
I consider that as a possibility down the track. Yeah, it'd be nice if we could sell some of our product on site and popularise the product that way.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? No. Thank you very much, Mr Hopkins, for your submission. Okay. Do councillors have any questions for officers? Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just curious if a permit to build a proposed dwelling was granted, and then the property was sold, for example, is there anything that precludes someone making that existing dwelling twice as big, 3 times as big, provided they comply with building regulations? But we've got a proposal for a 2-bedroom dwelling here. What can happen in the future?
Through you, Mayor, in the event this became, in essence, a rural residential lot, any future owner would have exactly the same rights as on any other lot with a residence on it to apply to extend it. They also would be able to cease any agricultural activity that was taking place if they wished. So, you know, we can't obviously predict what ultimately will happen, but as in a recent case in Forest, for example, where we had a farm management plan for an orchard, in that case where a dwelling was allowed on a small lot, it subsequently got sold off at a value far above an agricultural rate as a lifestyle living property. So we can't see into the future. If it becomes a residence, it has the same rights as any other residence and subject to getting the relevant permits for any extensions or other buildings. It could develop further.
Thank you. Just in relation to potential for a 173 agreement down the track, I think I know the answer to this, but may not carry any weight in relation to an agreement applicable to a future sale or something like that, which restricts or goes to restrict the any future development?
Through you, Mayor, it would be very unusual to have a Section 173 preventing future development. Similarly, it wouldn't be easy to put on a Section 173 requiring agricultural activity or anything on the land. The only time we've really gone down that route was at a property in Corrangamite, Corrook, And on that occasion, again, the property went straight up for sale, and we just had queries how to get around the Section 173 Untitled requiring implementation of a farm management plan.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. Is it correct we have no objections, either from referral agencies or internally or from anyone from the community at this stage to this application?
Through you, Mayor, there was an objection to the application from the neighbour who expressed concerns about the future use of the site, whether it could become an Airbnb, whether there could be future development around effluent, or around questioning the agricultural activity that was proposed, amongst other things. That objection was withdrawn following a consultation meeting, and that was the only objection that was received to the application.
Thank you. And one more, if I can. And has Council considered any similar applications in the last few years in this area? And what was the outcome?
I mentioned an application in Forest for a dwelling on a small lot where there was a proposal for an orchard, and it was put forward that a dwelling was required to actually manage and maintain the orchard. That was granted a planning permit by Planning Committee against officer recommendation. So that was in 2019, and in 2021 that property was sold as a lifestyle property for $760,000.
Are there any further questions? No. Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move an alternative motion which is been provided on page 176, which is to approve the application.
Okay, that's the motion up on screen. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Bell, is it to be opposed? Oh, you'll talk to it? Okay, no, okay. So councillors can see that up on the screen. It's also on page 176. Councillor Costin is the mover.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'd like to thank the officers for preparing this report. It's quite a comprehensive report, and I feel somewhat uneasy proposing the alternate motion. Thank you for the work that's been done. This is a fairly unique application for a dwelling on a small 1.4 hectare lot. It's very small. It's a bush block. It was created by a road realignment. The block was created in around 2001. It was sold by the Roads Corporation, or Vic Roads, or whoever was responsible at that time, for about 10 times the going rate of farmland in the area, and that was sold on the basis that it would a dwelling would be allowed on the site. And in fact, the owner did have a permit. The current owner did have a permit to build a dwelling, but wasn't in a financial situation to build a dwelling at that time, and the permit expired. And since then, the planning rules have changed. The lot is surrounded by road reserves on all sides, and everyone agrees, including VCAT, that this little piece of land has no agricultural value in the traditional sense of broad-scale agriculture, either as a standalone allotment or as an adjunct to the other land. And when you look at the closest piece of land across the road reserve, it's covered in bracken fern, blackberries, and not very far away is a tree plantation, a blue gum plantation. So it's not productive agricultural land for grazing purposes. The reason of discouraging dwellings on these small lots, less than 40 hectares in a farming zone, is to protect or enhance broad-scale agriculture. But retaining this property as a vacant piece of land offers absolutely no benefit to protect or enhance agriculture in the area, and that's what makes it unique in our consideration. And the owner has told us he's been inspired by Bruce Pascoe's book, Dark Emu, and I admire the proposal to develop a bush foods agricultural proposal. He wants to build a dwelling on this land so that he can ensure that his proposal is economically viable, that he can control pests and vermin, rabbits and wallabies and other things, and that he can ensure that he's on site if there happens to be a fire, bushfire around the area, and also to prevent theft of property. And I'm probably been in the situation of being an owner, an absentee owner of a small farm, and I can tell you it's incredibly hard, and it's devastating when wallabies come in and chew the fruit trees that you've planted not long before, and even more devastating, and this happened to me, when the tractor, which I loved, is stolen. So I do think there is a need to live on site to make the best of this proposal. And we know it's economically viable. The farm consultant shows that potentially in the longer term, the income could be around $90,000 a year, which is a substantial amount of income. We know there's a market for bush foods, and we know that the farm zone recognises that small-scale intensive agriculture may require a dwelling on the land, in fact allows a dwelling on the land, and it seems logical to me that 24-hour on-site management is needed for this sort of agricultural proposal. Our officers don't agree with this logic, but respectfully in this case, I support the professional view of the agricultural consultants over that of our officers. So I believe council should be encouraging these type of small business enterprises, particularly this one for bush foods. We shouldn't be putting obstacles in the way by refusing the owner the right to build a dwelling, to make sure that his proposal becomes economically viable. And I recall a similar situation down at Jellybrand many years ago where a neighbour of mine built a house on a small lot and had this vision to plant blueberries, and we all thought he was a bit crazy. But he now supplies blueberries to the major supermarket chains and is a significant employer in the area and contributes to the economic, makes an economic contribution to the Jellybrand area. So it is possible, but I don't think that would have been possible at all without the owner living on site. So I feel we should support this applicant and his business proposal by approving the application for a dwelling to help him establish a successful bush foods business, which may just snowball, and we may find that there are other small farms in the area who may adopt a similar approach to small-scale agriculture, and it could make this area of our municipality, which is not really good farmland, but it could make it the bush foods capital of Victoria even. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bell?
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Mr Hopkins, for your submission to us just now. it's certainly a unique situation that we're finding ourselves in at the moment. I was just talking earlier around some of the challenges that we do have trying to justify the granting of a dwelling on an allotment of this size. It's certainly not the first one, nor will it be the last that comes to us. So again, we're forced with the challenge to understand how it relates to a commerciability side of things, and also on how it relates to the planning scheme, which we need to adhere to as well. I think Councillor Costin has touched broadly on where I see the main issues and where the benefits and why the benefits would be for building a dwelling on this allotment. I think to me it's pretty clear, and I think Mr Hopkins has just reconfirmed in my mind why a dwelling on this allotment would be beneficial to not only the Shire, not only to his own enterprise, but also to a fledgling industry which I've got to know a little bit about, but certainly by no means an expert. So I've been interested to hear this unfold today. So, some of the challenges that I see when coming to making a decision here is the fragmentation of land that allotments of this size can create, which can actually be counterproductive to productive agriculture more broadly. And to me, only stands to mind why a dwelling here and more intensive management of a small allotment can actually benefit farming more broadly. And that is separate from the farming enterprise that you're talking about, Mr Hopkins. It's more of a broad sense. One of the great challenges that we've got in this Shire, particularly in areas that are almost peri-urban in nature, is the amount of mismanagement that occurs through the lack of presence from an occupier. So I think this actually deals with that challenge and could be beneficial to the control of noxious weeds. The challenge of justifying commerciability around building a dwelling and how that might enhance production is a really tricky one for me. I've always tried to take it on a case-by-case basis, and I think today Mr Hopkins has been able to describe why a dwelling on this property would be very beneficial and almost critical to the viability of this enterprise. So I can see why it's at odds potentially with the planning scheme, but I support the view that Mr Hopkins holds towards wanting to build a dwelling on this allotment. I think thirdly, and I've already touched on it to an extent, but the opportunity to not only give more exposure to an industry that is becoming very promising, it's very popular, it makes sense in a climate that is changing. We've got a food source here already. It's been here for many tens of thousands of years and more, of course. So to utilise those resources and not have to utilise other more impactful resources is, I say, only a benefit to the community as well and to the Shire. So I support Mr Hopkins' pursuit here. Regardless of how this goes, I wish him well, and I'm certainly a supporter of this motion in front of us at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, another difficult decision away for councillors, I think, and quite rightly, the officers put up a recommendation not to issue a permit for a dwelling on this property. I can see why that was put up. That's the rules, and on a personal level, frankly, I've been burnt a couple of times when we've voted against some of those previous officers' recommendations, and we've heard about a property in Forest, and I was one of the councillors that supported and went against the officer's recommendation, and yes, not long after that the property was sold and the original intent that was put to councillors was never pursued. Similarly, just recently, another decision that I wrestled with, and voted with my heart, not my head. That went against officer's recommendation. Of course, that property has gone on the market, and the original intent that was put to councillors is not being carried out. This property is a little bit different to both those in that it's a very small piece of land, and as farmland, really, it's almost valueless. And I don't see that a neighbouring farmer would be interested in purchasing that piece of land to add to his agricultural pursuits for any sort of real money for a start. And the pursuit that is being used for now is agricultural. It is commercial value, and I can see the need to be residing on site because it is very, very labour intensive, and it is the land is subject to invasion by native and foreign fauna. So it's a difficult decision for me to vote against what the officers proposed, because I think they were right to apply those rules to the recommendation. But when I weigh everything up, if this land wasn't going to be used in the way it is, then it would just perhaps go to wreck and ruin.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 5-0. Thank you, councillors. That concludes this planning committee meeting of the Colac Otway Shire. I declare this meeting closed.